My intended audience for the speech is Michigan's legislature. Have you ever imagined a world that's overtaken by a foreign power that has taken everything from you? Your drinking water, your land, your food, your job, your business. And I'm sure you've all thought of it as it's your job as legislators to protect the people of this state. But have you realized that we've already been invaded? And I guarantee that you've encountered these invaders at some point or another. These invaders are the invasive species to Michigan. And if you think that they're not a threat to us, I have substantially more evidence to prove that they are harmful to us. I'll begin by explaining what invasive species are and why they are so dangerous. The waters of the Great Lakes provide hydroelectric power, irrigation, drinking water, fishing, recreational activities, and other benefits for millions of people who live in the basin, states Michael Vicelli in his article, Invasive Species Impacts on Infrastructure. And these invasive species can threaten our very way of life, as most of our own life is revolving around the Great Lakes. The article Aquatic Invasive Species, written by Steve Stewart from MSU, states that the Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory reports that as of 2007, there were more than 180 aquatic species with reproducing populations in the U.S. That means there's over 180 species in the Great Lakes that don't belong there. And that's such a huge number, and not to mention, that's only the species in the Great Lakes. We have more species on land that are doing harm to farms and forests. Not to mention, other plants can outcompete native plants. So for example, fast-growing shoreline plants such as purple loosestrife and common reeds sprout quickly and crowd out existing vegetation, causing a decline in the diversity of native plants. And this is what they do, and it shouldn't be a shock that they're going to outcompete and damage our own native plants. And to further prove my point, in Executive Order 1312, invasive species are defined as an alien species whose introduction does or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm and or harm to human health according to the cost of invasive species, an article published by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services in 2012. And even though we've classified these invasive species as something that is dangerous and or is potentially dangerous, we fail to see the danger that they really provide. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services also state that invasive species are a leading factor in freshwater fish extinctions and endangerments. And this is why we should care as facts like this, because things like those extinctions and endangerments are permanent. Once they happen, it happens. You can't go back, you can't redo it. This is permanent damage, and this is why you have to care. In addition, invasive species also cost a ton of money for the government to try and get rid of them. The article titled Great Lakes Under Stress, Invasive Species as Agents of Ecosystem Change by Joseph Atkinson and Helen Domsteig states some invasive species such as the sea lamprey and the zebra mussel have had significant economic impacts, costing billions of dollars in the U.S. And that's just the damage that only 2 species have done, and it's costing billions. Imagine what over 180 species will cost. And as of today, we do have some controls to keep invasive species in check. These control methods include chemical application, manual removal, biological control agents, trapping, shooting, and burning, as stated by Michael Vicelli. But these are only minimally effective, as they are short-term fixes to a long-term problem. And a lot of these processes are very costly. And to illustrate my point further, Stewart mentions in his article that the total economic losses in the Great Lake Basin due to aquatic invasive species were estimated $5 billion per year in 2005. And that was stated in 2005, and here we are 15 later still with the same problem, which shows, one, that our costs have gone up, and that we've also pushed off the actual danger and threat they pose to us, and that we've had poor management. Which brings me to my next point, to press for harsher legislation to be passed, which allows for quick, effective action to be taken against invasive species. The bills and laws that we currently have in place have allotted time constraints for these invasive species, but these time constraints are indefinite. And so we need more definite timelines, because time is something we're always fighting against, because these species reproduce very, very quickly. So the longer they are in the environment, the faster they reproduce, and that's bad news for us. Therefore, I propose that the Michigan legislature should enact a bill or law that allows for quick action to be taken. And in addition, I also propose that the legislator needs to allocate funds to find a more effective and specific treatment to take care of invasive species. This way we have a more effective treatment that's specific to those invasive species, so we're not harming our native plants, wildlife, and it's preserving our native species. So now that you know why new legislature is needed, let's envision what that legislature will look like when enacted. So imagine a trip to one of the Great Lakes, and you're there for vacation to relax and have fun. You're there with your family, your kids, they're going fishing, splashing around in the water, running through the forest, no worries. Everything is peaceful and harmonious there, and that's as nature should be. Now picture this, a lake covered in toxic algae, has dead fish in it, barren forest covered in moss and vines, there's no recreational activities, people have to constantly scrape mussels off their boats, and no hunting's allowed. Which image do you prefer? I prefer the first image, as nature should be. The second image is what's currently happening and will happen to Michigan if we allow invasive species to continue. Invasive species are dangerous. They are sneaking and cunning and come into any place and knock out the native species, but we can stop the damage that they cause. National Invasive Species Council Secretariat Michael Viscelli states a streamlined process is necessary to allow agencies to more effectively manage invasive species. We must enact legislation that allows us to take care of invasive species quickly. The faster we get on top of this problem, the faster the problem goes away. In addition, we need to enact a fund for more research surrounding invasive species so that it's specific to those invasive species to eradicate them as opposed to spending money on solutions that are only short-term fixes. We also shouldn't let the environment suffer. That's a very wrong thing to do because the environment should not be held responsible for the messes that we make in it because we also live in the environment and it's cruel to make other things such as animals and plants suffer from our own mistakes. The environment we create is the one we live in. So what environment do you want to live in?